Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the recently released racing game F1 2021 and see how it compares visually to its predecessor Formula 1 2020. For this video, we're going to be analyzing how the various visual elements between both games have evolved since last year, including the complexity of the vehicle models, the texture quality, lighting, shadows, and various visual effects. And both games are going to be played on the PC, with the settings pushed up as high as possible at a native 4K resolution. However, the motion blur options will be disabled for the sake of image clarity. Alright, so let's kick this comparison off by first looking at our Formula 1 cars, starting with the Ferrari. Now, as expected, there are a number of subtle changes to the design of this Formula 1 car that have less to do with the game and more to do with the actual real-life changes that the team have made to the design, either to improve its competitiveness or to meet regulation standards. The nose, for example, has had its corners pinched more, allowing for increased airflow. And the cape's carbon fiber finish looks like it's been redone, with a much finer, more intricate texture map this time. This same high-detailed carbon fiber pattern can be found throughout the car, especially along the wings. Other than that, the wings haven't changed all too much. There's a few very minor alterations, like the new rounded corner to the rear of the end plate, but it's otherwise pretty negligible. Moving up the body of the car, we have new fins or vanes on this year's model that were likely incorporated to reduce the car's lift. And there's also a few other more subtle changes to the curvature of the car's body and engine housing. This is pretty much the extent of the visual change that you'll experience with F1 2021's vehicle models. A majority of the changes are just changes made to reflect the real-life design of the cars. But as far as the actual visual complexity and quality goes, the changes are negligible. The only real thing that stood out to me was the edge smoothing here on the rear exhaust, with AMD's Fidelity FX sharpening really helping to smooth out those rounded curves to hide its polygonal makeup. Next we have Team Red Bull. Here, the changes are even more difficult to spot. Like with the Ferrari build, the carbon fiber texture maps look to have been improved upon. There's also areas, specifically along the tip of the nose cone and the edges of the wing, where carbon fiber has either been added or removed. A bigger change can be found in the rear, with Red Bull's previous double-pipe wastegate exhaust having been changed to a single-pipe design instead. But again, as far as the visuals go, there's not too many noticeable improvements when looking at these car models. The only thing I feel is worth pointing out is that the cockpit view, just like last year, has seen a very slight bump to its texture resolution also, most noticeable when looking at the driver's gloves. Next up, let's take a look at how the environments have changed. As always with these F1 games, it seems Codemasters has simply taken their level designs from last year's game and touched them up slightly, likely scaling it to maximize performance across the game's available platforms. If you've seen my video from last year, you may recall that there were some minor downgrades to the quality of the texture work, more specifically these distant buildings. It was a minor downgrade, and honestly not one that many players would have noticed anyway. But regardless, it looks as though Codemasters has fixed this issue with F1 2021. With the old high-res versions of these same building facades returning, along with a bump to the texture resolution of other environmental objects more prominently featured like these barriers. Curiously, there's also been some changes made to the various miscellaneous vehicles surrounding the track. This red crane that was featured in front of this building for the past few games has now been changed to a yellow crane instead, and similarly, this truck off to the side has been switched from yellow to red, with a dirty flatbed in the back replacing the clean metal one from before. Many of the boats in the harbor have also been changed from sailboats into much larger yachts, likely cutting down on the need to render moving flags or thin details like sail riggings. The various vegetation along the side of the track has also been boosted in quality, with more intricate details like individual leaves from trees standing out better than before. And those distant trees along the hillside that looked a little off last time have been adjusted to blend in more naturally with the ambient light. Sadly, not everything has been improved. The road surfaces have seen a considerable drop in quality, with a much flatter looking texture and significantly less detail. All that burned tire debris, for example, has been taken away and does not accumulate throughout the course of the race either. It's a very odd drop in quality considering other aspects of the environment surrounding the track itself have had their quality improved. Though again, these are all details that will barely stand out when racing anyway. Next up, we have lighting. Now, the lighting has not actually changed all too much at all. There's a very slight adjustment to the coloration, giving F1 2021 a more natural color tone, but it's not nearly as big a leap forward as we've seen with past F1 titles. There are areas where the lighting now helps to draw out texture work that previously wasn't visible, like the edge of this white building here, or these pink concrete balconies. But the coloration of the vehicles, the amount of light reflected off of them, and the general global illumination isn't as improved as I would have expected, especially considering this is the first title in the series to utilize ray tracing technology. It's still technically an improvement over the reflections in F1 2020 that utilize a combination of cube maps, SSR, and literally duplicating assets through an alpha layer, but the final result is a game that almost looks like it's not reflecting anything at all. In F1 2020, you can easily see bright colored objects in the environment being reflected via screen space reflections on this wet road. But in 2021, there's nothing. This, coupled with the weaker specular lighting and lower quality road surfaces, inevitably lead to a much less impressive image overall. The shadows are another area of concern that may be caused by these new ray tracing techniques being utilized. At first glance, it looks as though the shadows are now being rendered more accurately based on the object's distance to the ground, allowing objects closer to the ground to have much sharper projections than those further away. But then you have these weird shadows like this one from a streetlight that seems to be rendering two separate shadows simultaneously, one from the post and the other for the bulb, which just doesn't make any sense at all. I also found that the fences along the track here no longer project shadows, whereas they were clearly visible previously. Then we have effects. Now, as usual, there's not too many effects to compare in these F1 games. There's of course destruction and physics designs, though that doesn't seem to have been changed all that much. And other effects like smoke and rain are carried over exactly as they were in 2020. But again, the rain just doesn't look nearly as impressive overall, due to that change in lighting and the texture work on the road surfaces. Finally, let's wrap up with a brief sound comparison. Which game do you feel has the superior audio quality and design? And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, F1 2021 features yet another marginal improvement to its visual design, coupled with a few missteps along the way. The various character and car models have undoubtedly been improved, with higher res texture work and some nice sharpening to remove those rough polygonal edges. But the quality of the environment is a bit less cut and dry. Many of the background decorative aspects have been improved, but the road surface itself doesn't appear quite as good. The lighting and shadows are probably one of the more disappointing aspects of F1 2021, as there haven't been any real worthwhile improvements, and the new ray-traced effects do more harm than good. Therefore, the only real reason I feel it's worth picking up F1 2021 over its predecessor is the inclusion of the new campaign mode. Like with many of EA's sports games lately, F1 2021 has a new story campaign, complete with cutscenes and characters to create a more meaningful single-player experience. It's not necessarily the most groundbreaking storyline, as you basically just work your way from rags to riches and deal with various sponsorship disputes, but it's still a marked improvement over the old campaigns these games typically incorporate. But what do you guys think? Are the changes made to F1 2021 worth a trip back to the track, or were you expecting more from F1's venture into next-gen territory? Let me know in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.